going to call the Assembly Audit Committee, Internal Audit Committee to order. We have with us Ms. LaFrance, Mr. Rivera, Mr. Chadwick, Alex, Livia, Pam.
Susie Marshall.
Pardon?
Susie Marshall.
I'm sorry. And Barb, you all, the rest of you want to introduce yourselves?
Barbara Jones. Mandy Ox, Clerk's Office. Gail Turner, IT.
Scott Blade and Tom Rod and
Mark Merchant, Chief Information Security Officer.
All right.
John Rod, Parks and Recreation.
What brings you here?
Some comments and questions, I guess, regarding the Chugacta River Advisory Board.
Yeah, from my perspective, well, I think what we're going to do is recommend it be extended for a year, work on some of the issues on both the administration and their point, and so on. So, from my perspective, you don't need to stay.
Okay, well, that works fine. I just want to make sure that if there's any questions regarding our coordination with the clerk's office and whatever needs to transpire.
All right, hang on then. All right. So, with the committee's approval, I'd like to take item A, the IT business continuity plan, to the end of the agenda and deal with these other things really quickly. Mr. Chadwick, would you give a little summary of the audits you've done that you're recommending some action?
For the sunset audits?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We did 7 sunset audits this year. We have 5 of them that have things that could be done on them. The Urban Design Commission, the commission membership is not in the Anchorage Code. The Chugach Eagle River Advisory Board, we're recommending a 1-year extension so that they can have their meetings posted, have attendance done, those types of things. The Municipal Women's Commission, they're a very active commission. They have some reports and resolutions that they present. A lot of those reports and resolutions, they tend to bypass the Assembly and the Mayor and go directly to the House and Senate. So you might want to consider having something put in place so that you have access to those reports, so you know what they're doing. The Bidding Review Board, that only meets when required, and sometimes it's not required during the scope of our review. Several years back when we looked at the Bidding Review Board, they hadn't met at all. This time they met one time. So we're recommending that they only be extended, or that they be extended for a 5-year extension, since they're not terribly active, but when they are active, they're very important. The Housing, Homeless, and Neighborhood Development Commission, they are supposed to have a report to the Assembly by June 1st of each year on the progress of the Anchorage plan to address homelessness, and they did not have that report. So that's in summary, what we found. The Arts Commission is doing pretty good. The on-site water and wastewater advisory commission is doing. They're an active board, looking at code all the time. So that's in summary. Those are the things that we have.
All right. And any questions, committee members?
Yep.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I just want to echo Mr. Chadwick's comments about the resolutions, particularly with the Women's Commission. I see that they provided a letter to the mayor highlighting their 2018 activities. Seeing as these commissions, as all commissions do, report both to the Assembly and the mayor, I think it would behoove them to send these to us as well. And then interesting that you bring up they are sending a lot of resolutions to the legislature, which I appreciate. It would also be good for us to know those as well, what they are sending out. And just, generally, when I see that a lot of these commissions are sending out resolutions, I mean, unless I'm missing them, and perhaps my colleagues can affirm or deny this sense I have, I feel like we're not seeing a lot of these resolutions. I don't know where they're going. And, if our commissions are doing good work, I want to see that good work.
Sure.
And I absolutely concur. And Barb and I had a conversation just a few minutes ago. So we could do that by ordinance. My suggestion would be that you send a letter to everyone requesting to be in the loop. And I just, in a couple of years, I've had this responsibility. There are lots of boards and commissions, how many, 30-something?
Yeah.
And so on, but they don't produce a lot of paper. I'll be surprised if we get more than 3 or 4 a month, or 5 or 6 or something like that. So, and it can't be a great burden for those guys to add us to the distribution list, push the darn button. So, it's your call. But
Yeah.
my suggestion of the letter first, and see, and of course, Ms. Slavic, if the administration would want to advise us that there's some that we ought not to bother with because they're not valuable or something, we're very open to that.
Okay.
On the urban design, we, the assembly, have a decision to make of whether or not to change the ordinance by an amendment when this report comes to require a number for their membership, and or whether or not there ought to be some distribution of education and skills or experience. So that's a decision, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm surprised that this commission doesn't have that, because I know this commission is one of the more technical commissions, and a lot of the technical commissions already have that in place. I know, isn't it Waste has that? Yeah, they have very detailed. So why don't they have that in place?
Mr. Chadwick.
Mr. Rivera, through the chair. They did have it in place prior to the rewrite of Title 21. It was inadvertently left out. When basically they took Title 21, they took it all out, put it back in, and left it out. The last time we looked at this, they said, good catch, we'll put it in. It never happened. The person who was working on that left the municipality, and it just did not happen. So it used to be there, and I talked to Mr. Schutte about this, and he was going to pursue it. And I suspect, look at what we used to have, and probably mirror some of that. So that's the plan, I think.
All right. So, Mandy, do you staff this committee?
Not typically, but I am today.
Well,
Not typically.
between you and your hired man there, would you inquire Mr. Schutte of where they're at on that, please? Hired hand, I should have said. Or having followed Mr. Riviera, I could have said hired guy.
Oh, thanks.
All right. So unless there's an objection from committee members, it's my intention to have move the bidding review to a 5-year review, and get Mr. Schutte or someone to give us language to amend the urban design review, and then what would be Mr. Slivka,
Yes.
what would be an appropriate way for us to remind the Women's Commission that we're still looking for the report that was due a month ago or whatever? Oh, no, a bidding review. Wait a minute. Which
Housing.
Housing. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think we could just, through Ms. Jones' office, send them a note asking for their report.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe we ought to have a reminder when we meet again to see if that's happened. Yeah.
Just a question about the CDR advisory board.
Yep.
Okay, I don't know if we're going to get to that one separately.
Yeah, no, and there's a
Yes.
interesting epistle here from Ms. Osiander, who has a great deal of credibility with me. So what Mr. Chadwick is recommending, we extend them for a year. And for the record, I'd like to say it's our intention is 1 year from now, when we do this review, it's not only a review of the commission or whatever they call themselves, advisory board, but also the relationship with administration. Do you have some comments on Sugar Eagle River Commission, or what do they call themselves? Advisory board.
Just that, noting some of the comments from Municipal Auditor and coordination with the clerk's office with Barbara, if there are some gaps, because we're kind of we're the instrument,
Yeah.
you want to call it, that helps them convene, both from opening and closing the building, making sure that the recorder is available, picking it up at the end, and things like that. So if there's a missing step or a missing piece, I guess I'm trying to make sure that the next time an audit is done, missing minutes, which was one of the key items, sounds to me like what happened was the batteries on the recorder were dead. They didn't bother to check to see if it was recording. Went back to Barbara, came back to us with instructions, plug it in.
Did it have one of those little pictures?
That's a simplified version of what happened. So we have a note on the recorder in my office in Eagle River. And so I think in the future, hopefully, we don't have this situation. The one missing piece is, I need to know what our role is, because we've been asked to post the minutes or agendas, and I just need to confirm if that in fact is the case out of our office, or does it come from Barbara's office?
Through the chair, there actually are no minutes for boards and commissions. The recording is the official part of the minutes, so they really supplant the minutes, the recording, better than minutes. The agenda is my office's job, and we sort of missed the boat a little bit there because Ms. Osiander notified us that they were having a meeting, but we put in the meeting, but we didn't always put the topic of the meeting. And her agenda is essentially the topic of the meeting. So we'll correct that. And so that should correct that issue. The other issue, I do believe there was a malfunction, not only batteries, but I do think there may have been a malfunction in the recorder. So we did provide them a new recorder. But even this one, we still recommend plugging it in. So, so I agree with Mr. Rada. They have been awesome help, and it really should be working better.
All right, and it is my predisposition to get rid of boards and commissions that aren't needed or aren't effective. But I want to leave this one in place for a year and so on. Plus, I understand from Mr. Schutte that we're going to have a significant review of Title 21 and some rewrites this fall or winter. And maybe I've misunderstood that, but that's something that Sugar Eagle River is very interested in, and so on. So I want to leave that in place, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with you. If we have boards and commissions that aren't really fulfilling a role and duty, then let's either change them or get rid of them. But there is one that's we have before us that I think is doing way too much. I don't think any commission has the amount of tasks this particular one has, and that's the Housing, Homeless, and Neighborhood Development Commission, the HAND Commission. I've gone to some of their meetings in the past and met with them, and I mean, the range of duties and responsibilities this commission has is extraordinary, from making recommendations on federal priority funding for housing, to reaching out to the public and trying to get public opinion on a whole host of issues: housing, neighborhood revitalization, homelessness, advising us on a whole host of issues, providing a report on homelessness, advising the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's quite a task that this commission has, and I know that they are in the process of trying to figure out what exactly it is that they want to do. I just want us as the assembly to support them in that process, and it may behoove us, as we learned with the Public Safety Advisory Commission, for us to sit down with this commission and help them through that process.
Yeah, and I concur, and there's at least 2 other groups dealing with homelessness, right? And somebody ought to think about, is there duplication there that we don't need, or a way of dividing responsibilities, and so on. I've attended, I think, a meeting at least of one of each of those groups, and I'm impressed with the earnestness and background, how qualified the folks that are working the issue. Point well taken, Mr. Cheddar.
Going back to the Chugach Eagle River Advisory Board,
Right.
just for a moment, just so you're aware, they have 7 members on that board. There's 4 members serving currently, 3 are vacant. Of the 4 that are serving, their terms all expired.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of an email that went out recently asking the community councils for recommendations. The email probably went out about 2 weeks ago, I guess. But the board does have some vacancies, and an email went out from the deputy chief of staff.
Yeah, have you seen his epistle from Miss Osiander?
I saw that, and I went through that, and that's something that we had considered in our report, and most of these things, the first 4 paragraphs, or the first 3 paragraphs, we addressed them in the report. For example, she talks about the appointment of community council members not being represented. And on page 5, we addressed that, and in a footnote to the table, confirmed that they could confirm their presence at meetings, and we said the board resolutions approved in 2 board meetings indicated board attendance. So I think we addressed those concerns in the report. There were a couple things right at the end where it talked about we don't want to meet for no reason. Well, we didn't really address that in the report, but I would agree, you don't want to meet for no reason.
Yeah. All right. That point well taken. All right. Without objection, the committee will move on to item 3A. Mike, would you give us a summary of your analysis of the information technology business continuity?
This is the 3rd audit that we've done on the information technology business continuity plan. And from the time we did it back in 2010 until now, there has been some progress made. When we did it in 2010, there was absolutely nothing. We now have a draft plan, although it needs additional work, and the person who was working on it has left the municipality, I think, in January. But there's certainly more work to do. So in a nutshell, we haven't fully developed and implemented a business continuity plan in the event of a disaster. And given today's environment, we need a business continuity plan. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And so for the purpose of our discussion here, there are 2 ways the word plan can be used. One of them is the formal document that outlaws it all, so on and so forth. So let's refer to that as the written plan. And then there is the actual, on the ground, protocol and procedures for not only taking care of a breach of some kind or a problem, but also hopefully defensive measures to protect ourselves from that. So I think that we who are kind of the de facto board of directors for the city, and they're very capable chief executive officer and pretty staff, all of us owe it to our responsibility to make darn sure all of our eggs are in one basket almost, and you're holding it.
Got it.
And we owe it to our responsibility to have you do about as good a job as we can afford, and so on. So please tell us where you understand we're at. First of all, on the recovery plan, and secondly, on protective measures.
Okay, so on the recovery plan, we agree it's very important, and we want to make sure we get this plan finished, updated, and ability to follow it. We hope to have all the revised plan completed by November 30th.
You mean written plan?
Written plan.
Yeah.
And then we'll start to, in that plan, we will identify how we're going to start exercising this plan. On the daily, our team, the Office of Information Technology, keeps the business running on the 24/7 daily, right? So if there's an outage in any respect, if it's network, if it's application, if it's desktop, we deploy as needed and have very quick response to keep the city running so that we don't have any interruption in service. So we are constantly doing that on the daily. So in an emergency situation, let's just say like in the earthquake, for example, what that did is our team just went in hyper alert status where we were suddenly like, okay, fire. So we look at critical infrastructure. So you have the utilities, and then you have fire, and you have police, and you make sure that those systems are up and running so that we can respond as needed. We can make sure 911 is working, make sure the phones work, make sure. And so we immediately, my team just all hands on deck, and we supported and got everybody. Anything that was down like the first day, like resulting from the earthquake, we had most of those up and running, I would say, by the end of the first day. I'm just going to look at Mark there. But I think we did extremely well in that and helping the team and helping the emergency response center. We were very responsive to that. So I do think we definitely have exercised our emergency response, and I do think we just need to document and exercise it more for sure. Totally in agreement with that. And then as far as like what we are doing for cyber.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sure.
What's the date you said you'd have that done by?
November 30th. End of November.
November 30th. Would you make a note that when we deal with this thing here a couple of weeks, that we put in their work? That's what we're expecting. Excuse me. Thank you.
No worries. Yep. We also have a cybersecurity incident response team. So in that team, we already have members that is managed and by our chief, our CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, Mark Merchant, who's here, and that team includes members from AWU, ML&P, Risk, HR, Legal, Police, and Fire. Right? And what that team does is meets on the bi-weekly, and it discusses different strategies addressing all the different cyber attacks going on in the world that could impact us. So that's a constant, how do we handle this? What is our new strategies? How are we going to deal with that? And we also have a plan on how we do respond. We will respond in case we have a day one
You have a
incident.
written plan?
We do have a written plan.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, we want to make sure that first you have
The
a
written
procedure
plan, yeah.
and the protocols to go do the work.
Yep.
And then secondly, then, all right.
And I did bring my team here if you have very specific questions, if you want to ask about security, cybersecurity, or if you want to ask about our network infrastructure team, or maybe our, we've talked about different ways we can handle licensing, if software licensing, if we have to ramp up, and how we would handle all that, and that would be handled by Gail on my team, and she's responsible for business operations. Then we have Mark Dahl, and he is our infrastructure lead. So they handle network, phones, backups, data centers. That's their role.
Any questions? Mr. Frost?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're hearing a lot about ransomware.
Yes.
What's the Munis approach or plan for that, or can you speak to that?
That's
I
what-
mean, is it?
We kind of
public?
talked about like a high level, what we can say here, and I think I'll just say some more things if you want. But basically, we have an annual enterprise security awareness training, so that's targeted at all the users to make sure that we try to prevent people from clicking on those emails that can do damage. We also have DNS filtering, so we're blocking activity for malicious domains. We have definitely 24/7 network monitoring. We also have automated response from our intrusion protection systems. We have offline backups to ensure that our systems won't be impacted in case there is a ransomware or malware attack. We are constantly patching our workstations and our servers, so we're upgrading all of our, making sure that our environments are updated so that we don't have the vulnerabilities of old systems that can't be patched. We also are constantly reviewing software as a service vulnerabilities, so that is very topical, and a lot of users will just go in the cloud, we'll put it in the cloud, but we really need to vet those cloud services and make sure, whether it's infrastructure as a service or software as a service, that we understand our vulnerabilities in those spaces. So any type of procurement like that, it runs through our office, and we review it for for security vulnerabilities. When I started, we had we had the CISO, and then now we've added one additional person, security analyst, and then we're adding a second one in beginning of next year. And we keep adding more layers of security in our network and in our processes, but if you don't have more eyes on the data, it's not going to help you. So you need additional staff to make sure that you can understand and interpret what's happening. And then we're updating security policies that are also impacting, like password protection, password upgrades. We have several policies that are in front of the mayor right now. I just need to be approved.
To follow up,
Sure.
if I may. So I guess the big question is, and it's hard to know how things play out, because I understand that as far as attacks go, those are also evolving and changing and moving. But I mean, could what has happened in other cities here, Valdez and Matsu, in Alaska, happen to the MOA, or in the lower 48 too, where, okay, on the one hand, you have to check out library books by signing out a card, versus payroll is impacted, versus 911 technology is impacted. How safe are we?
How about I let my CISO explain what he details his security perimeter, and then also maybe talk about the exposures of what's happening, like maybe what happened in Texas.
Through the chair.
Yeah, identify yourself.
My name is Mark Merchant. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the Municipality of Anchorage. I have been in this role for 5 years now, and I was with the state of Alaska for 19 years prior to that with Homeland Security Emergency Management, but also with the State Security Office. And in the past 5 years, we've came a long way. We had, when I first got here, there was like 70% XP boxes, and so just that alone and moving where we are at today has been leaps and bounds towards protecting our critical infrastructure. So what's happening with ransomware is that there is no such thing as a security solution. So there's no one thing that you can go out and buy. You can't spend $500,000 to say, hey, we're protected, because it just doesn't work that way. You've probably heard the phrase zero-day protection or zero-day malware. And what that means is that if a system is infected and there's no signatures to block that infection, then it will corrupt your systems. And so all we can do is put these layered defenses in place, which we have done, and which Susie explained a lot of those that we do have in place. The best is reaction, our response time to those. Just not more than, it's been a few weeks ago now, there was an infection, someone clicked on a link. It was over at our one of our utilities. And we were able to take immediate action with our 24/7 monitoring in place, and we were able to pull that system offline. That system was able, as soon as they clicked on the link, it went out to Russia, grabbed some malicious payload. It actually started encrypting some network drives. Luckily, the network drive, as soon as we pulled that device off the network, it stopped the encryption. But what they were encrypting was a pending delete folder, and luckily that pending delete folder had 100 gigabytes in it. So it's how fast we can respond to that. And then again, like we said, with offline backups, we can restore that type of stuff as soon as possible. And then having a community, we're working with the FBI, we're working with the National Guard, we're working with the state, we're working with the universities to create a cyber task force, if you will, where we can actually go out and we can help these communities that need it, because it's just not working. I mean, when they go down, they need help, and they're calling in vendors, and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on that type of stuff, and they don't really need it. So they'll get people in place that can actually help them.
That's local, within our state.
Yes, sir.
Are you all in contact with other government folks doing your job?
Yes, actually, just last week I spoke with, and it's funny because when you talk about cybersecurity, we are so few, and so when things happen around our nation, we are a member, and since I got here 5 years ago, we became a member of the MSI's Act, and that's the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center. They are the only information sharing analysis center for the United States. So and there's all 50 states are involved, hundreds of local communities, tribal territorial governments are part of that ISAC. So with that, we partner with them. The IDS solution that we have in place, Albert, that's what caught what happened over at our utility. We get it at their nonprofit. We get it at a very low cost for that 24/7 monitoring solution. And so it's about a layered defense. It's about keeping our eyes on it. You know, because my 2 eyes, it was enough at the time, but I think it's still a little bit of luck involved but we get better every day.
So, you have a question? You go ahead.
I was going to ask about the staffing piece. I think, Susie, you had mentioned having staff analyze or review.
Right, but so more eyes on data. So, if you have alarms and, you install a piece of software, hardware combo, and it's going to set off an alarm that does, spot something, you have to have somebody that's going to see it. And so that's part of the reason why we need to at least have at least 3 people doing cybersecurity in our environment. That's what we're going to staff up next. We have 1 more person to hire.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mark, is it common, well, back to your military background, you probably remember with security, you got to keep testing it and poking around the edges because people get lax. Is it common within your very specific profession here to have somebody come and test your system and poke at the edges and see if they can get in?
Absolutely, and in fact, there are free services with the Homeland Security, and we can pull those guys in to actually come and do just kind of little security audits, making sure penetration tests, that type of stuff. We can allow them. We are at a point now with our, we do have a vulnerability management solution, so we can actually see where all our vulnerabilities are. And then once we get to a point where we're like, okay, hey, we're ready for someone to come and start checking us personally, then we'll be able to even get a little bit more secure.
So, where do you keep your offsite storage?
Or off-network storage.
So my name is Mark Dahl, Infrastructure Services Manager for this county. Last fall, we reallocated some of the funds we had for spinning disk backups to an off-site storage tape vault, which we implemented. We don't have the off-site storage built yet. That's in the works. We'll start this weekend. It's called East Wire Center at ECS. We got some very, very good network contracts and data center contracts with our last network RFP. So, those are in place now. I work with Mark every day. I don't believe he's going to stop everything. So my job is to be the pessimist and make sure that if it does get through the perimeter, we have those backups and that we've tested those restores and we can do that.
When's the last time you tested?
The failure that we had over the weekend. We had some aging hardware fail. It's the same backups that we use to recover those systems. So we had one of our systems fail last Saturday. So that was the most recent test.
So if we had a huge loss of all our data set, you could reach out and grab the offsite stuff and put it, how long would it take you to get it back up?
So depending if the infrastructure is available to restore it, right now we only have our prime data center, and we don't have the infrastructure capacity to do a restore someplace else. In this year's capital plan, we have additional funding set aside for building that out. Those are hosted environments that if worst case scenario, we can go out and do our restores in that. We do backups of our identity management into Azure, into the cloud, and then our business continuity data for historical archives of business data. And then your business continuity just to bring the systems back online. So that's 3 different layers there. We have some additional complexity with SAP, which there's a full disaster recovery for that back on the East Coast. And the IBM mainframe, which hosts our tax environment, we keep alternate backup storage in that, but we don't have a hot site capability for that. That's quite expensive. And with the SAP rollout, there was no intent for the municipality to maintain that environment.
I would say about the CAMA is that we are upgrading that. We are migrating it from the mainframe environment to a.
So that is migrating to an Oracle environment, and that's about a 2-year roadmap. Anyway, those plans are in place. And
that project is underway.
And that is a funded activity.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a question?
I waited for you to make that way.
At least I don't have to whistle if you're eating peanuts. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any opportunity for, or maybe you're already doing this, like working with the ASD, or I've heard that they have some storage capacity, or have and maybe I'm totally wrong, but have an IT center near the base or in East Anchorage, and is there any way for like backup with them, or?
So, with the Flickenstein, I believe is I've had conversations with him, and we chose 2 years ago to exercise a backup data center recovery option through the state of Alaska. So we used the state of Alaska's contract at the GCI data center at South Anchorage Data Center. It's Old Main on Raspberry Road. That's primary. Secondary is free, believe it or not. It came with the RFP, our network RFP. It's at the East Wire Center over off of Muldoon and
ECS.
ECS. The network connectivity to go to Anchorage School District didn't pencil. That was extremely expensive. store. So yes, we do have 2 sites. They're with 2 different vendors, and they're colo managed data centers, very secure access.
And just a quick follow-up, and the ASD, they're totally separate as far as IT. There's no opportunity for like sharing the 24/7 monitoring. I imagine they have like massive amounts of data.
Yeah, we are very separate. But it doesn't mean that we can't in the future, talk to them and figure out how we can work together. I mean, we've had many conversations with the state. Even we originally talked about even sharing a mainframe with the state. But with the changing of the guard last fall, that just didn't happen. So, I think we're always open to what we can do to share and help. I just had a conversation with the CIO for the Matsu borough just 2 days ago, and we were talking about like how could we share maybe the GIS environment so that we could leverage our dual workforce. So I think it's definitely possible, right? And I don't see why we can't continue to have those conversations.
And I guess in my non-technical brain, as long as that would increase the vulnerability and exposure, right?
Right.
If someone gets into ASD, suddenly they get into the entire
Yes.
state of Alaska.
Yes,
That wouldn't happen though, right? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Totally happens that way, and that is what we would definitely,
Okay.
why we would probably not do it lightly. We would
Right.
just casually, like, sure, we'll
Right.
connect.
Right.
We have very,
Yeah.
the firewalls and all the barriers to make sure that we aren't openly at risk by sharing environments.
And to the point, Texas, if you're not familiar with Texas, the state of Texas, there was 23 municipalities that just went down exactly what you guys are saying.
They were sharing, and then they all went down. Yeah.
So there's a balance then between shared backups and having enough separateness so that it's not, reach one and you have access to the entire state of Texas or however many municipalities.
Right. Yeah. Good. And this, I mean, an example would be like the, like MLMP, or not MLMP, but Alaska Water, so AGLU. So they have what they call a SCADA system that maintains all of their utility infrastructure. And it's a separate network than the business network. Same way with MLMP. So you keep those separate, and you have if there is any sharing, they're very specific small, rules that are very limited access, so that if you do have to transfer data between them, so the vulnerability is less to turn off everybody's power or turn off everybody's wire. So that's why they're separate, So it does make sense to say separate from a security perspective, but it would be we would evaluate it, we would decide. Yeah, but I think we got the people, and I think we have the resources to make good decisions about that.
What kind of a physical facility, what does it have to have in order to be a place to locate your off-site backup stuff?
So, typical data center, it's uninterrupted power supplies, generator backups, secure access for who can get on, who can get off, and that's the real advantage that we've been able to piggyback on the state's contract. What's in place with GCI over there, and be more than tour with you guys to go see what that means. And then the East Wire Center, ACS, has stood up a very similar. It's very expensive to set these things up, so it is very advantageous to do a colo where you're sharing those expenses with 100 other businesses rather than doing it just on meetings, nickel, like we have right now. It's very, very expensive. Yeah. Not necessary.
So we used to manage our own data center. We still have some emergency operations in the EOC building. That's a small data center for us as well right now.
The what building?
The EOC, the Emergency Operations Center.
Yeah, that's what had come to mind to me.
Yes, there's
Quite a bit there.
There is quite a bit there. And there used to be quite a bit at they call it the Diamond Data Center, and that is where the police do their training over at Jewel Lake and Diamond. And that used to be our data center, but it wasn't, the facilities weren't maintained, and uninterrupted power supply wasn't reliable. Anyway, we just had to remove that risk and take everything out of there, put it, and now we have it in this GCI, we call it the South Data Center. And then we also are having a backup at this ACS Eastwire Center.
So as far as data centers go, you can colo and share like UPS and generator, but then have your own
Right,
separate.
yes, good point, yes,
Yeah.
very separate, yes, they don't touch.
Right.
Yes, the networks don't talk to each other, but they share. They're sitting in the building and they have their own internet connection, they have their own. Right. You can explain that more, but.
Yeah, it's more like a secure condo, if you will. You know, you can get in the door, but your home's your home. You share walls, you share heating, you share cooling. That's what it is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions, Mr. Riera?
No.
All right, so I'm impressed. This is all to show you ginned up over the weekend to get prepared for us.
Oh, this
Did
is
really
normal
well.
work. We got this.
And has anybody got any more information that would help us in our responsibilities? All right, so I think we have an action plan for what we're going to do with the other sunset things. You certainly convinced me that you're working all the angles of our protection and looks like recovery, which is great. You've committed to the next couple of months getting that all declared, or committed to rational pieces of paper and files that will, and please submit that also to our auditor when you get it done. And Mike, let's put that on one of our future agendas.
Okay.
Say 3 months out, and have you tell us what, if you believe that it meets the statute requirements.
Okay.
Maybe 4 months out, so we get to December, and so you'll be past their November 30th deadline for when you give it to them.
Sure, that works.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess it's an administration decision and perhaps ours at some future time to ask to witness a real-world test of it. My little bit of experience tells me that thousands, if not million, very, very bright people are out there trying to figure out how to breach all these systems. I have one of my son-in-laws manages a major piece for the Department of Defense. You know, and if they can't keep the doors shut and windows latched, you know, it's harder, or gotta be hard. So the Israelis breached the Iranian plutonium production through the SCADA system. SCADA systems are very traditional for managing high speed and critical equipment. As I understood it, they sent the bugs through printer cartridges that were on the network and destroyed all those centrifuges. But yeah, I had a buddy who was in the Navy in San Diego. He said the darn SEALs over at Coronado were always running ops against them. I mean, they had guys march up the gangplank in an admiral's uniform with a complete retinue, or come in over the side in the middle of the night, tie all the guards up, and throw them in a shaft log for a few days. But those are kind of real world tests to keep people on their toes. All right, anything additional? everybody clear how we're proceeding, Mr. Rivera?
Yes, I'm clear. I actually, if I could ask one other question separate from this. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was curious, what is the latest update on the CAFR?
We expect we're working on final stuff today, that they will issue the opinion tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm sorry, on what?
The CAFR.
The audit. our
Yeah, right.
audited plan.
Oh, yeah. All right. Thank you all. It's been very valuable for me and assuring.
I think Mr. France has a question.
Well, I was gonna follow up with Mr. Slipka. Are you getting everything you need from the state in a timely manner, or
Oh, we
any?
got that all a long time ago.
Okay, so no.
Most of this delay has been outside of our control, but not related to the state.
Okay.
We should have it all closed up. We're working on the final stuff today, so that should be ready tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Audience participation, Eugene?
My name is Eugene Crowe. I'm going to represent myself. I live in Lancaster Valley. Follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, it's made by the governing body, more like the public interest. First, I would like to compliment. Regarding the emergency and how you handle emergencies, you are far way ahead of versus domestic borough. Good example is the way the earthquake. We have an emergency center. You kept the people informed and substantially kept the people informed of the emergency. And where the borough in the earthquake didn't have a press conference until Monday, and keeping the public informed is critical, and I applaud you for doing that. I'm not saying you're perfect, but it's far ahead. Another example of an emergency scenario is you got to deal with the health and safety here, but out there, as you know, we have a fire, and how is the public being informed? And I believe you saw some clips on the news how people are leaving these places minutes to spare to get out of there. They're in harm's way. And they're having community meetings the mayor's doing out there in Willow, and there's no notice about it. And they invite certain people there and the public is not kept informed. And I was at the borough meeting, and we still don't know what really is going on, and that's bad. But another thing on the side note here is you do a good job on your IT scenario, and you're dealing with it. And as you know, the borough's experienced not thousands, millions of dollars cost dealing with the IT problem. And you are far ahead, and I applaud you in what you're doing, and keep on it, because if you fail to keep on it, it's going to cost it. There's going to be a big price, not just the information, but to repair the damage that's been done. And the borough does not, to this day, know how. In the most recent borough meeting, they made a reference to, why don't we go privatize? That's what's coming out Tuesday night, the meeting I missed with you. That's the kind of attitude that's going on. You're staying way ahead. Stay on it. I applaud you what you're doing. And then the last point is this. Where's one point? Yeah, it's a criticism here. The letter from supposedly Debbie Asiander, and I'm concerned by the words, and I'm sure you are, but the fact it's not dated, it's not signed, and is this really from Debbie Asiander? Okay, and she's a former member of the Assembly, and I appreciate the concern of what these words were, but it's critical that there's a documentation of whoever's reporting. And that's all I have to say with 24 seconds to spare.
Thank you. Thank you. Any additional business come before us? Thank you all. Very valuable, and we're